They invited me for Thanksgiving just to ask for money, so I brought dessert and a lawyer. By dessert they were crying. By midnight they were tenants. I heard my name, or rather how they referred to me. That dirty and stupid old lady's only useful until she signs. I was looking for my coat. That's all I was doing. A simple thing, the kind of small act an old woman does at a holiday dinner when she thinks it's time to go. The house was too warm, the air too sweet with artificial cinnamon. My feet were starting to swell in shoes I should have stopped wearing a decade ago. I just wanted to step outside for some air, but I never made it out the door. I was halfway down the hall when I heard it. At first, just murmurs, 2 voices behind a cracked door. I paused. The room was dim, a narrow shaft of light cutting across the carpet from the bedroom. My coat, I remembered, had been tossed on the bed earlier that afternoon when Thomas took it from me. "I'll put it somewhere safe, Ma," he'd said, with that charming smile he wore whenever he wanted something. The voices got clearer. It was Thomas and Mark, my sons. I stepped closer, heart already thudding, not out of fear, but something worse, a knowing. A woman gets that after 70 years of life. You feel a shift in the wind before the storm comes. You smell something sour before the milk turns. That was Thomas, calm, precise, as if discussing logistics for a business merger. Mark chuckled, that low, grating laugh of his. "Yeah. After that we get the house appraised, call the agent, split it before the holidays are over." Silence, then Thomas again. "You sure she won't want to stay? She might try to, you know. Nest. I was a sparrow now, apparently, a bird past flight." Mark scoffed. "I'm not running a damn retirement home. Once it's done, she's out. 2-3 months tops. We'll come up with something. Say the roof needs repair, some zoning issue, whatever. By summer, she's on her own." I gripped the wall. I didn't cry. I didn't gasp. I just stopped breathing for one long, aching moment. These were my boys. The same boys I bathed in tin basins when the water heater broke. The same boys I fed from my own plate when money was tight. The same boys whose fevers I sat beside all night with damp towels and whispered prayers. Thomas was born in a thunderstorm. Mark came during a power outage. Both of them, carved out of pain and love and sacrifice. And now? Now they were carving me out of their lives, with legal documents and deadlines. My coat was on that bed. I could see the sleeve peeking out from behind the door frame. But I didn't take it. I turned around, walked back down the hallway, each step heavier than the last. The house was too quiet, too staged. The centerpiece on the dining table looked like it came from a magazine. The turkey was already carved, even though I hadn't even gotten seconds. No one had offered me pie yet. Jenny wasn't there. They didn't invite her. Why didn't they invite her? Because she would have asked questions. She would have noticed the forms Thomas had tucked under that placemat at the head of the table. She would have seen the way they kept topping off my wine glass. I sat back down. Mark noticed me first. "You okay, Ma?" I nodded. Smiled even. "Just needed a moment. Getting old, you know how it is." Thomas laughed like he understood. He didn't. He brought me a slice of pumpkin pie, too sweet, store-bought. I thanked him anyway. They asked me about my arthritis, about my pension, whether I'd ever thought about simplifying things, maybe letting them help with the property taxes, just to ease the burden. I nodded along, murmured soft answers, let the words drift past like wind. Inside, I wasn't old. Inside, I was awake in a way I hadn't been in years. They thought I didn't know about the house deed, thought I forgot the lawyer I saw 10 years ago after my husband died, thought I didn't keep copies of the estate file in a locked drawer beneath my winter clothes. They thought I was lonely, easy, ripe, but I remembered every bedtime story, every insult I swallowed when they were teens, every Mother's Day card they forgot, every time Jenny stood alone in the kitchen while they rolled their eyes at her softness, every time they called her dramatic for crying when I fell. She was the only one who cried. The only one who helped me shower when my hip gave out. The only one who called, unprompted, just to hear my voice. And she was the one they didn't invite, because she would have stopped this. I finished the pie, let the fork clink softly against the plate. Mark was talking about interest rates. Thomas had pulled out a laptop just to show you some numbers, Ma. We don't want to rush anything. I looked at them both, really looked, and I smiled, not out of warmth, but because I knew something they didn't. I knew what I was going to do. It started with a phone call. Not then, not in front of them, but soon, before dessert was over. They had underestimated the wrong woman. I'd been silent for years, grateful, accommodating, invisible, but I was never gone, and I was never, ever stupid. I wiped my hands with the cloth napkin, placed it gently over the plate. Then I looked up and said, "Boys, you've been so thoughtful. I really appreciate this dinner." Thomas beamed. Mark leaned back in his chair like a king, and I, their mother, the woman they were ready to discard like used wrapping paper after Christmas, smiled wider. Because while they were setting their trap, I had already sprung mine. It was Thomas who called. I hadn't heard his voice in weeks, not since the summer, when he stopped by with that real estate brochure, pretending it had arrived by accident in my mailbox. I'd told him then I wasn't interested in downsizing. He'd smiled and said, "Just keeping you informed, Ma." So when the phone rang that Tuesday before Thanksgiving and I saw his name light up on my little flip phone, my first thought wasn't excitement. It was suspicion. Still, I answered. Habit, maybe. Hope. "Ma," he said, voice bright, "how's my favorite lady?" I told him I was fine. My hands ached, my knees creaked, but I was still upright and breathing. He chuckled. "Listen, we're having a Thanksgiving dinner at the house this year. Mark's bringing the kids. Rachel's cooking that pecan thing you like. You should come." I hesitated. "Jenny?" There was a pause, just long enough to mean something. "Oh," he said, too casually. "She's got her own plans, I think." I didn't say anything. Just let the silence sit between us. He filled it fast. "It's just going to be close family, you know, keep it simple. Keep it simple." Funny how people say that when they want to complicate your life behind your back. I agreed, softly. Said it'd be nice. Asked what time I should arrive. Told him I'd bring a dessert. When I hung up, I sat for a moment, staring at the little phone in my hand. Then I called Jenny. She answered on the first ring. "Hey, Mama," she said, that warmth in her voice that always reminded me of home. I didn't ask right away. Just listened to her breathe. Sometimes, when you're 70, the sound of your child's breath is enough to anchor you. But I had to ask, "Did you get invited to Thanksgiving at Thomas's?" There was a pause, a long one. "No, Mama," she said finally. I didn't. I already knew. But hearing it broke something soft in me. "He said you had your own plans," I murmured. Jenny let out a dry laugh. "My plans were to bake your sweet potato pie and bring it to your house like we always do." Silence again. Then I asked quietly, "Do you know why?" Her voice cracked. "Because I get in the way." I didn't argue. I didn't say, "No, that's not true." We both knew it was. Mark and Thomas didn't like when Jenny asked questions. Didn't like her tone. Didn't like her stubborn sense of fairness. She was the youngest, the softest, but also the only one who ever raised her voice in my defense. They called her emotional, dramatic, sensitive. I called her my daughter, and they hadn't invited her. "Don't worry about it, Mama," she said after a long beat. "Just go, eat something, keep the peace. That's what you do, right?" I felt the jab, but I understood it. My silence over the years had been both shield and sword. It had protected her sometimes, other times it had left her exposed. I told her I'd be fine. "I know," she said. "You always are." But when we hung up, I didn't go back to the kitchen to finish my pie crust. I walked to my bedroom, opened the bottom drawer of the old oak dresser, the one with the broken handle and the cedar lining, and pulled out a yellowing business card. Mabel King, Attorney at Law, Elder Estate Services. She and I hadn't spoken in a couple years, but she'd helped me after Robert died. Helped me put the house deed solely in my name, helped me write a will that no one knew about but her. I slid the card into my purse. Then I walked back to the kitchen, rolled out the dough, peeled the apples. Life is full of quiet decisions, ones that change nothing on the surface, but everything underneath. Thanksgiving morning came with gray skies and a breeze that tasted like frost. I dressed slowly, buttoned the blue blouse Jenny had given me for Mother's Day, the one with the tiny stitched violets at the collar, pulled my old coat from the hook, slipped on shoes that had seen better soles, and packed my basket. Baked apple tart, wrapped in a gingham cloth, a jar of spiced cranberry relish, one good plate and 2 linen napkins, because even at my age I still don't trust other people's dishware. And beneath it all, tucked flat under the basket lining like a secret, Mabel's card. I locked the house, fed the cat, left a note for the neighbor in case she dropped by. Then I drove. Thomas lived 30 minutes away, in one of those new developments with cul-de-sacs and fake brick facades. His lawn was perfect. His car was newer than mine by 20 years. I rang the doorbell. Rachel answered, already wearing an apron and a thin smile. "Hi, Mom," she said. "Happy Thanksgiving." I handed her the basket. Let her pretend to be pleased. Inside the house was warm, too warm, the kind of heat that made you drowsy, made you say yes to things you'd normally question, the kind of heat that loosens your guard. The dining table was set for 8. I counted. Thomas, Rachel, their 2 kids, Mark, his wife, and their baby. Me, just me, not Jenny. Rachel poured me a glass of wine. Mark kissed my cheek. The grandkids hugged my knees. I smiled and sat. I told myself I would observe. I would be polite. I would eat, nod, sip, listen. But deep down, something inside me had shifted. I had come to this house as a mother, but I wouldn't be leaving as one. Not in the way they expected. They thought I came for turkey. But I'd come for truth. And this time, I wasn't going to leave it behind. The table was almost too beautiful. Crystal glasses, polished silverware, napkins folded into shapes like birds, swans, or cranes, I couldn't tell. A rosemary sprig rested on each plate, tied with twine, as if we were in a magazine ad, not in Thomas's suburban dining room. Even the butter had been carved into a pumpkin shape. It was the kind of show you put on when you want something. I'd seen it before, from salesmen, from politicians, from my late husband, once or twice, when he wanted forgiveness more than anything else. Rachel floated around the table like a hostess in a stage play, smiling, adjusting forks, pouring wine, her apron still spotless. She wasn't cooking anymore. Dinner was already done. The real work had begun. "Mom, can I get you anything else?" she asked as I settled into my seat. I shook my head. "I'm fine, dear. Everything looks lovely." Thomas beamed. "We wanted to make this special. You deserve that." Mark nodded, sipping from a glass that hadn't been empty all night. It's been too long since we had a proper family holiday. A proper one apparently meant excluding Jenny. I didn't ask, didn't bring her name up. I had already learned many years ago that some questions only invite lies. Better to let the silence grow roots and watch who waters it. The turkey was already carved and served. There were 3 kinds of stuffing: sweet potatoes with marshmallows, green bean casserole with those crunchy onions on top, dishes I hadn't seen in this house since Thomas moved in. They complemented each other. Passed plates to me first, laughed too loud at old jokes I didn't remember telling. At one point, Mark leaned in with a soft smile and touched my hand. "You look great, Ma. Really. You don't look a day over 60. I smiled back, but inside something coiled. Because I know what men sound like when they're trying to charm their way into something. And my son sounded like he was selling me to myself. Dessert came too quickly. Rachel brought out pumpkin pie, pecan tartlets, and even a plate of gingerbread cookies shaped like leaves. I hadn't made dessert this year, just the apple tart I brought, which sat untouched on the counter. They didn't want my pie. They wanted my paperwork. I could feel it in the air. The way their eyes darted at each other, the way they waited for the last bite to be swallowed before anyone spoke again. Then Thomas stood up. "Hey, Ma," he said, too casual. "Can we steal you for a minute, just us boys?" I looked up from my coffee. Rachel immediately started gathering plates. "Take your time," she said, stacking dishes with practiced speed. Mark rose, gesturing toward the hallway. "Let's go chat in the den, more comfortable there." I nodded, slow and careful, like someone who believed her sons were just being sweet. But I had seen enough birthdays, enough funerals, enough family meetings in my lifetime to know the difference between a request and a maneuver. They led me into the den. Leather chairs, books no one read, a framed photo of me and Robert on the mantel, from a time when my hair was black and my heart still soft. Thomas gestured to the armchair. I sat. Mark closed the door. The room fell silent for a beat too long. Then Thomas, ever the diplomat, began. "Ma," he said, "we've been talking, just thinking about the future." I nodded. "The future's always worth thinking about." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We want to make sure you're taken care of. You've worked hard your whole life. You shouldn't have to worry about anything." Mark jumped in. "Yeah, we want to help, but it's tough, you know, with taxes, upkeep, all that." Thomas pulled a folder from under the coffee table. I hadn't seen him place it there. He opened it, revealing a typed document, clean, neat, legal. "We figured," he said, "it might be smart to start transferring some of the property stuff now, just to streamline things, avoid any messy probate issues down the road." He said it like it was a kindness, a favor, like I was the one being done a service. I looked at the paper. The first page had my name and a lot of language I didn't need to read to understand. They wanted the house, not now, maybe, but soon, before I got too forgetful, before the doctors started using words like capacity and fitness, before Jenny or anyone else could raise a flag. "Don't think of this as giving anything up," Thomas said softly. "You'd still live here. Of course. We'd take care of everything. You'd have no responsibilities at all." I picked up the paper, studied it like I didn't know what it was. But I did. It was the first step in erasing me, not out of cruelty, but out of convenience. That's the worst kind of betrayal, the one wrapped in good intentions. I set the paper down gently. "What about Jenny?" I asked. Mark stiffened. "What about her? She's my child too." Thomas frowned. "She's emotional. She doesn't get how this works." I nodded slowly, eyes on the floor. "And you two do?" Silence. Then Mark said, "Ma, let's be honest. You're getting older. It's just practical. We want to make sure your wishes are honored. This way, there's no confusion. No confusion. Just a quiet transition into irrelevant." I looked up and smiled. "Boys," I said, "that's thoughtful of you. Truly." Relief washed over Thomas's face. Mark let out a breath. I reached over, closed the folder, and patted it. "I'll give it a good read tonight, maybe over another slice of pie." Thomas nodded. "Sure, take your time, no pressure." No pressure, only the weight of a life about to be signed away. But I wouldn't be the one signing. They thought they were laying a trap. What they didn't know was that I'd seen it coming. And I had already set one of my own. I carried the apple tart to the table myself. It was still warm, the crust golden, the scent of cinnamon and butter rising like memory. It was the same tart I'd made every Thanksgiving since Thomas was 5. He used to beg for the corner slice with the most crust. Mark always ate the apples first, then the pastry. They had their ways. I'd thought once that was love. Knowing the little things. I set the dish down gently, as if it were made of glass. "Something sweet," I said, smiling. "Old recipe." They thanked me. Rachel brought plates. The children leaned forward, already asking for seconds before the first slice was cut. I served them. One by one. Thomas, then Mark, then their wives, their children. I moved slowly, purposefully, not just because my knees ached, but because I wanted to remember every face, every bite, every fork lifted without knowing what was coming. Before I sat, I reached into my purse. My fingers found the old phone, worn from years of use. I unlocked it, opened a message thread labeled Mabel, and typed, "Come now, time to serve them the truth." Then I hit send and slid the phone back in, unnoticed. I sat down, took the last slice of tart for myself, ate it with the same grace I'd taught them all their lives. No one asked why I looked so calm. No one noticed the tremble in my pinky finger. They were laughing, chatting, clearing plates. Thomas poured more coffee. Mark turned on the game in the living room, volume low. "Mama," he said, "this was perfect, just like always." I nodded. "It'll be the last one I make." He chuckled. "Oh, come on, don't be dramatic." But I wasn't. Not anymore. Because this was it. The final dish I'd ever serve from the place of motherly affection. The last spoonful offered in peace. After tonight, things would not go back to the way they were, and I had made my peace with that. I watched the meat. They didn't taste anything. Not the tart, not the regret that would come. They were full of plans and contracts and clever wording. They thought their trap was flawless, that I was soft, pliable, cornered. But they'd forgotten something. I raised them. I'd seen the way they twisted words from the time they learned to lie about broken windows and missed curfews. I knew the way Thomas looked when he was proud of getting away with something. I knew the tight smile Mark wore when guilt tried to surface, but pride held it down. I had fed those mouths, bathed those bodies, paid for braces and books and bail once, when Mark was 20 and stupid, and now they wanted to package me like a thank you card. Sign the back, tuck me away. But I wasn't done. Not with them. Not with the truth. They thought I was being polite. What I was being was patient. "Mama," Thomas said again, "you all right?" I smiled, always the smile. "A little tired," I said, "but satisfied." They nodded, pleased. Rachel began collecting plates. The children ran off toward the TV room, already fighting over cushions and remotes. I stood up slowly and waited, because I knew the next course wasn't mine to serve. It was hers. Mabel was never late. The clock struck 9. They didn't notice. Thomas was on his 3rd glass of wine, retelling a story from college. Mark had his feet up, laughing too loudly. Rachel was loading the dishwasher with a smile that never quite touched her eyes. And I was waiting, not for the pie to settle, not for coffee to cool, but for a knock. And it came, sharp, punctual, like a line drawn under a sentence. Ding dong. Thomas blinked. "You expecting someone?" I shook my head. "No, dear, but I'm not surprised." Rachel wiped her hands on a towel. "I'll get it." "No need," I said, already rising. I moved slowly but with purpose. My heels clicked gently against their polished floor. Every step a reminder I still moved under my own power. I still stood on my own terms. I opened the door. There she was, Mabel King. Tailored coat, gray hair swept up in a no-nonsense twist, eyes sharp behind rimless glasses. And in her arms, a neat leather portfolio. "Hello, Evelyn," she said with that lawyer's calm. "I brought the documents just like you asked." I stepped aside. "Come in, Mabel. Dessert's done, but the real course is just beginning." Behind me, chairs shifted, voices lowered. Thomas appeared first. His smile faltered. "Mabel? King?" he asked, already reaching for his memory. Mark stood up, too. His wife peeked around the corner, drying her hands on her apron. "I thought you retired," Thomas added, voice stiff. "I did," Mabel said coolly, "but some friends are worth the return." I led her to the head of the dining table, cleared a space. She opened the portfolio with calm fingers and pulled out a stack of papers. Thomas moved closer. "What's going on?" I sat, looked up at him. "You told me to divide things while I'm still thinking straight, that you just wanted what's best, that it'd be easier if I didn't wait till I was too far gone." Neither spoke, so I went on. You wanted me to sign your version of the future. I pointed to the folder they gave me earlier. But I already had mine written. Mabel tapped the top page. This, she said, is Evelyn's updated estate plan, signed and notarized 2 weeks ago. It revokes any previous arrangements made before her husband passed. Effective immediately. Thomas's jaw clenched. Mark took a step forward. You're doing this now? On Thanksgiving? I tilted my head. Is there a better time to talk about family? Mabel continued. The deed for this house is solely in Evelyn's name. As of this evening, she is converting it into a rental property. Tenancy agreements will be offered to both parties, Thomas and Mark, at market rate should they wish to remain. Otherwise, a 30-day vacate notice will apply. Silence. Like someone had unplugged the whole room. Thomas's face turned a shade darker. You can't be serious. Mabel didn't flinch. Everything is legal, witnessed, filed. We anticipated resistance. Mark sputtered. She's our mother. Yes, I said, standing now, facing them both. I am, and I still am. But I'm also the owner of this home, and after tonight, I'm not interested in being the fool of it. Thomas stepped closer, fists clenched. We brought you here to take care of you. We wanted to help. You brought me here to corner me, I said softly. To file my life away behind your names? Rachel sat down hard, eyes wide, one hand on her mouth. I looked at her. You knew? She didn't answer, didn't have to. I turned back to my sons. Do you remember what you said in the bedroom when you thought I was fetching my coat? Mark paled. I kept going. You said I was only useful until I gave you what you wanted. Then you'd get rid of me. Conveniently, quietly. I let that sit. Even Mabel said nothing now, just the sound of the refrigerator humming. Thomas tried to recover. Ma, it wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, I interrupted, and I heard it all. Then I walked to the counter, picked up my untouched tart, and handed it to Mabel. A little something for the road. She smiled. I always did love your baking. Thomas's voice broke. Where will you go? I looked at him. Really looked. For now, somewhere I'm wanted. Then I returned to my chair and let them sit with what they'd served. The house had fallen silent again. No more laughter, no more clinking glasses, no more talk of inheritance or how much easier life would be with me taken care of. Just the cold scrape of chairs being pushed in. The hush that follows truth when it's finally spoken. I stepped away from the table, took my purse from the hook, checked the basket, my coat, my phone, the last of the tart wrapped neatly in foil. Then I pulled out my phone and called the only person I needed, Jenny. She answered on the second ring. Mama? Her voice was sleepy but alert, the way she always answered when she thought I might need her. I breathed in deep. My throat felt tight, but my words came clear. Sweetheart, I said, I'm done here. You still got room for your old mama? She didn't speak right away. Then I heard her keys jangling. Always, she said. I'll be there in 20. I hung up. For the first time that night, I felt like myself again. I didn't wait in the living room, didn't sit under their roof like a guest or a burden. I stood by the door, coat on, purse in hand, basket at my side like I had somewhere to be. Because I did. I was going home. Not the house. That was brick and timber and paperwork. Home was wherever I was wanted. Jenny pulled up in her little sedan at exactly 9:41. She didn't even park in the driveway, just left the engine running, hazard lights blinking in the dark. I opened the door before she had a chance to ring the bell. Mama, she said, stepping out. Her eyes were red already. I handed her the basket. Hope you're hungry. I saved you something sweet. She took it from me like it was sacred. I thought they'd... She began, but stopped. They did, I said, but not how they planned. We didn't say much after that. She opened the passenger door for me. I was halfway inside when I turned around. Thomas and Mark were standing just beyond the hallway, frozen in the glow of the kitchen lights. Their wives flanked them. No one moved. No one spoke. I looked them over one last time, not as their mother, not as a woman they'd underestimated, but as a soul who had finally, fully seen the truth. And I said, not loud, but firm enough to cut through everything, I used to sit at the head of this table. Their faces didn't change. I kept going. But tonight, I'm choosing a different seat. Beside someone who remembers love, doesn't come with conditions. Thomas took a step forward. Ma, I shook my head. You had your chance. Then I turned and left. No slamming doors, no drama. Just the quiet sound of my shoes on the steps and the soft click of the car door closing behind me. Jenny pulled away. Neither of us looked back. They came the next day. Not together, of course. That would have meant facing each other's shame. Thomas arrived first, papers in hand, tie still on from whatever meeting he had fled early. He didn't look me in the eye as Mabel sat him down at my old dining table, now Jenny's, and slid the tenancy agreement across the wood. He skimmed it, tried to haggle the rent. Mabel didn't flinch. I didn't speak. He signed. Mark came later, quiet and red-eyed, holding his infant daughter like a shield. She won't remember any of this, he said. Maybe to her, maybe to me. I didn't answer. He signed too. And just like that, the house they once tried to claim became mine in full again, this time as income. A monthly deposit, a line in my ledger. They still lived there, same walls, same rooms, but now they knocked before entering my life, and they paid for the privilege. Jenny and I settled into our own rhythm. Mornings were slow and sweet, tea on the porch, old songs playing low on the radio. She planted basil and tomatoes in raised beds out back. I taught her how to make my apple tart from memory, not recipe. Some afternoons we baked together. Sometimes we cried. Not out of sadness, but from that strange kind of joy that comes when the storm finally passes and you realize you're still standing. I kept to myself. Didn't tell anyone about the rental checks that arrived like clockwork each month. I didn't boast about the clause I'd written into the lease, how one missed payment meant immediate eviction, no exceptions. I didn't want revenge. I wanted record, proof that I had not been erased, that I had not imagined the betrayal, that dignity could still stand, even if it had to do so on tired bones and silence. People ask if I speak to them, my sons. I do, sometimes. Short calls, holiday cards, nothing cruel, but nothing deep. They ask how I'm doing. I say, well enough. They ask if I need anything. I say, only peace. What more is there to say? Love once broken can be mourned, but not begged for. They never said sorry, and I never asked them to. But I see it in how Thomas hesitates when he says goodbye, in how Mark lingers at the mailbox longer than needed, in how neither of them ever asked for the house again. They know, and that's enough. Somewhere along the way I stopped feeling old, not younger exactly, but more myself than I had in years, like I'd stepped back into my own name, my own power. I forgave them. But I did not forget, because forgetting would mean they were right, that I was meant to disappear, to surrender, to sign my name away like a check nobody wanted to cash until I was gone. Instead, I kept the pen. And now, every month, I get a check from the two boys who once called me a burden. They used to whisper that I was just a mouth to feed. Now they pay rent, not because I need the money, but because I earned the right to decide what I'm worth. They called me a freeloader. I call them tenants. The difference? Paperwork and perspective. Maybe you've been there too, at the edge of the family table, where laughter doesn't quite reach you, where they pour wine for everyone else but forget your glass, where your stories are cut short, your questions brushed off, and your presence treated like an afterthought. Maybe you've cooked the meal, set the table, wiped the counters, and still sat alone while others passed the plates over your silence. Or maybe, worse yet, you weren't invited at all. Maybe they called you dramatic when you spoke up, old-fashioned when you offered advice, too sensitive when your heart ached out loud. Maybe they looked at your hands, wrinkled, worn, and saw only what you could no longer do, not all you had done. And maybe, just maybe, you overheard the truth. Not the one they say to your face, but the one they say behind closed doors. She's too much. She's in the way. She's just a burden now. If you've ever heard your name spoken like a chore, if you've ever been written out of your own story, if you've ever sat in the kitchen while your family celebrated in the dining room, whispering about how to divide what you built, then know this: you are not alone. And more importantly, you are not finished. Here on Grandma, True Stories, we tell the truth others want to forget. We tell the stories that got swallowed in silence. We bring back the voices that were pushed aside. Because some stories don't fade with time. They simmer, they remember, and when the time is right, they return, just like she did. The quiet grandmother, the overlooked mother, the woman they thought was too old to matter, until she stood up, held the deed in one hand and her dignity in the other, and changed everything. This channel was created for women like her, for the mother who raised ungrateful children but never stopped loving, for the wife who kept the house running even when the man she married betrayed it, for the grandmother who gave everything and was still told she gave too little. We don't shout here. We don't scream. We speak with calm, with memory, with power. And when we speak, the truth lands heavy. Because revenge has no expiration date. Because dignity doesn't come with age limits. Because when a grandmother finally tells her story, the whole house listens. So if you've ever had to smile through disrespect, if you've ever swallowed your pride just to keep the peace, if you've ever wondered whether your silence protected them more than it protected you, then this is your place. This is your community. This is your voice, finally, fully, and unapologetically heard. Let Grandma True Stories speak for you. Let it become the voice you were told to lower. Let it carry the words you held back when your hands were full of sacrifice and your heart was breaking. Let it say the things you couldn't say because you were too tired to fight, too outnumbered to stand your ground, too afraid that speaking up would mean losing even more. Let this space tell the truth that others rewrote in whispers. Let it tell the world what really happened, what they said when they thought you weren't listening, what they took when they thought you'd never fight back, what they planned in rooms you weren't invited into, and what you survived in silence. Let it honor the nights you cried quietly in the laundry room, the years you fed everyone else first, the decades you were told, not now, not here, don't start. Because here, on this channel, you start. Here, the starting line is drawn not in youth, but in memory, not in volume, but in truth. Because in the end, you didn't crumble. They tried to wear you down, with dismissive looks, with forgotten birthdays, with legal papers slid across dinner tables, with phrases like "for your own good" that tasted like betrayal. But you didn't break. You rose. Not loudly, not violently, but completely. You stood with your head high, with your name intact, with your records, your dignity, your old recipes and older strength. You rose in your own time, and you took back what was yours, not just the house, the checkbook, or the family name, but the narrative, your story, the one they buried beneath convenience, control, and generational arrogance. You found it again, thread by thread, word by word, until your voice, the one they called irrelevant, became the one they couldn't ignore, and now your truth is alive, not in hushed apologies, not in belated flowers, but in the full, clear sound of a woman remembering everything. A woman who knows that betrayal can be quiet, that love without respect isn't love at all, that just because you gave birth to them doesn't mean they own your story. Let Grandma True Stories be the place where your silence ends, where the strength you carried in secret becomes the strength that speaks out loud, where your survival becomes someone else's roadmap, where another woman in her 70s hears your voice and realizes She isn't done yet either. Here, your pain is not exploited, it is respected, held gently, woven into something larger than a single life, something unforgettable. Because stories like these, they were never meant to stay buried. They were meant to be passed down, not as warnings but as testaments, not as revenge fantasies, but as reminders that you don't need to raise your voice to reclaim your power. You don't need to hurt them back to show what they lost. You only need to tell the truth and wait, because time, like justice, eventually comes around. And when a grandmother speaks the truth, not even time can silence her. Not the years, not the shame, not the rewritten history. Not anymore. So if your name has been erased from the family will, if your voice has been silenced at the table you set, if your worth has been measured in inheritance, not in love, then this is where you take your place. Share your story, subscribe now, and when the world listens to Grandma True Stories, they won't just hear a voice, they'll hear yours, and they'll remember it forever.